Button. There you go. Right. So just stand for a moment and give yourself a few seconds to just reflect on your posture before you start to move. Keeping it very simple at the beginning. It can get very technical, and that's always an interesting area worth following up. But we want to stand comfortably in line with the pull of gravity and just start to lose some of that tightness and stiffness within our body, and actually give ourselves a chance to feel that there's a bit of space in the body for movement. So if you have your weight a little bit forwards and then just gently let your knees soften and your hips drop back. So feeling the buttocks, hips, lower back overhanging slightly, hips roughly in front of your hip, roughly above your hips, I beg your pardon, knees roughly above the balls of your feet. So this isn't a massive sort of like stance, bending your knees a lot or anything like that. And feel that the weight of your upper body is supported both by your legs and also by your spine, and collarbone and rib cage, and that weight is flowing downwards into your legs, and again supported through the whole structure of your legs, including the skeleton, and then your weight sinking in to the ground. So the ultimate support, of course, is from the ground. The front of your body hangs slightly from your back, so don't pull your belly in, tighten your chest, or if you notice that you're doing that, try and just get that feeling of releasing. And then beginning to turn in the center of your body, arms feeling quite heavy, just beginning to swing around a little bit from your shoulders. I always start this quite small and feel how far can I move without pushing against the edges of that space. So the movement will fill that space and gradually sort of dissolve and erode away the edges of it. As you start to move, muscles warm up, the blood starts to flow, and you will get a little bit more movement. Just be aware of the. Just be aware of the areas in your body that maybe feel a bit tight, a bit stuck, a bit sort of maybe reluctant to move or whatever. Also, the areas that feel a bit painful, but that's a trickier process, because obviously if something's painful, there may be a good reason for that, and we need to understand the reason. You know, if you've got a knee hurting, check whether your knee's in line with your toes or twisting around or whatever. But some areas that are painful will just ease up. Sometimes that pain is just the energy stuck. In Chinese medicine, they sometimes will talk about two different types of pain. First, I can't remember the name of it actually, is pain that stays in one place essentially. The second is called floating pain. That you can sort of wake up in the morning, it's like, oh, a bit stiff there, and a minute later, oh, the shoulder's stiff, and it kind of moves around. And it's really, I suppose I'm talking more about that kind of floating pain in the first instance. You could take a couple of slow, gentle breaths. Imagine your lungs are down in your belly as you start to breathe, so that you get a feeling of the whole of your upper body, belly, front and back, so belly, lower back, middle of your back and solar plexus, and then the top of your back and your chest expanding in that order. abdominal breathing or bellows breathing. You know, the bellows, you pull the handles of the bellows back to suck the air in. And these are all things that also encourage a gathering of our attention within the body. And just becoming more aware of, more sensitive to the movements within your body, within what I sometimes think of and describe as the inner landscape of the body. Your arms swing around and just gently strike the sides of your body and, you know, round about the level of the tail of your spine. And the feel is if you ever hit a drum, you know, you hit a drum, boom, you don't smack it one, or you don't, you have to allow a certain amount of vibration to take place. And that idea of a vibration in our bodies as we begin to move, and the rhythm, the vibration moving through the body, perhaps one way we can engage with this idea of energy moving through the body. Energy has a range of different aspects to it, the term energy. So vibration is one way of thinking of that. But as always, don't get stuck on a way of thinking about things. And a lot of what we're doing is trying to just notice these changes, to observe these changes from moment to moment. So with that focusing of our attention, of course, we also start to get a very deep sense of quietness and calmness. Looking to feel somehow within the movement there is this still quality. Somebody said fairly recently that she felt that when she was in the class and we started off, it was almost like sitting beside the sea on a calm day. You know, you get that gentle flow of the waves, and maybe, you know, the waves on the stones and so on and so forth. And it's a very kind of restful quality about it. And that restful quality should be reflected in the movements. This Tai Chi is sometimes described as an internal massage, for instance. So all of these ideas are things that we can land on, use different images. None of them are complete in and of themselves. You can't sum up the totality of Tai Chi. It's very difficult. Raising your arms. Put one foot forward, just keep the width of your step and begin to transfer your weight from one foot to another. Let your body just turn. Notice which way your body's turning. Ideally, what we want to do is to turn towards the foot that we're moving into. That would be the kind of natural way. But quite often we can find ourselves turning the other way. And don't force yourself to change that. It may be that tightness somewhere in your hips or something like that is causing you to change direction slightly. So to push against that would be quite damaging. And again, a nice steady rhythm. This time, taking your rhythm from the movement of the weight forwards and backwards. And then just try that on the other side. So as well as being kind of quite a good way to start off any kind of movement session, or indeed to start off your day before you start to move around just in your ordinary life, these exercises do help us to make a connection with some very basic ideas, some very basic qualities that we want to look for in all the other movements. And give your legs a shake. So standing with your feet hip width apart. You can measure hip width from the outside of your foot, giving a slightly narrower stance. So it's ankles, so hips down to your ankles, or we could think of the midline of the foot or the inside of the foot. There's variations according to style, and I think this is a reflection of body type. You don't want your feet here too far out. You don't want them slapdash all over the place. You don't want them too close together. You want to feel that the structure of your body is in line with the pull of gravity, as I said before. So the first thing is, if my shoulders are like that, obviously my shoulder isn't being supported by my leg adequately, and I will fall over, or more likely I'll begin to strain. From front to back, a good way to work out where you want your weight to settle, where that alignment is to just rock your weight forwards and backwards a little bit. When you do big movements, you wobble around. So you eventually just make those small movements, those movements forwards and backwards smaller until they kind of come to rest. If you've ever rolled a ball across an uneven surface, like a lawn, it rolls over and it rarely comes to a dead stop. It sort of slows down and then it maybe rolls back a little bit and maybe forwards and sort of settles in. And it's that kind of thing that we're looking for, until we get to a point where we feel that gravity is kindly drawing our weight down into our feet rather than somewhere beyond them. And letting your hips drop back a little bit more and pushing up. Settling down and pushing up. And again, see if you can get this into a nice steady rhythm. It's harder to maintain a rhythm when we're moving slowly. Sometimes what I'll try and do is a count. I go 1, 2, 3, 4 as I go down, and then 1, 2, 3, 4 as I go up. For instance, you might have another way of doing this. Bring your hands around as though you're cradling the ball. Push up and let the movement expanding up from the ground. Push your elbows out, and then imagine the ball underneath your arms, standing in water. Sink your hips and let your hands follow down, pressing the ball down. Push up again, expanding, contracting. The exercise is rooting down, and that's the name of it. And what we're trying to do principally with this exercise is to get a feeling of our center of gravity dropping progressively deeper and deeper. I came across one description of the degree of root, I suppose you could call it, saying that you imagine your center of gravity, your root, going down 6 feet below the surface of the ground. another said 2 body lengths, which of course is more than 6 feet. So kind of have an idea, just as if you were going to, I don't know, hit a ball or something like that, you'd have an idea of where you wanted the ball to go, or even if you wanted to shout to somebody across the other side of a field or something like that, you'll focus on them and you're more likely to kind of direct the sound or the ball in that direction. And in the same way, just have this idea of your route going a long way down. And then coming out of that, and it is in this order, comes the upward movement. So a certain amount of springiness will develop over a period of time in your legs, your hips, lower back. So I mentioned sort of pushing the ball down into water. If you push the ball down into water, the resistance of the water gets stronger and stronger until eventually the ball will get pushed up. And so we want to find the tipping point between the pull of gravity, but also the response in our body and our legs in particular to that, which is to build up a sense of buoyancy, I suppose we could call it, that inevitably pushes you up. At the top of the movement, there's another tipping point where the impetus, the energy that rises up through the body is overcome by the pull of gravity. And this is a basic dynamic cycle of movement, of energy, that could apply to all of the exercises in one way or another. So now change into the wild goose with this image of the bird in flight. And if that image offers some kind of quality of smoothness of movement, grace of movement, maybe even the sense that if you get a feather and wave it up and down in the air, become very aware of the resistance of the air around you, something that we're so accustomed to that we simply don't notice it as a rule. And then parting the clouds. This time, your arms and hands are edge on, so they're sort of sliding through the water. So these 3 exercises really are very, very similar in the legs, but they're the same in the legs. You get that expansion in your body and then the contraction as you sink down. But a certain amount of variation through the upper part of the body. And now just coming back to the first of these exercises, cradling the ball and doing them as a little sequence. So rooting down, changes to the wild goose, changes to parting the clouds. And just notice the changes, what's similar, what's different. Once again, just allowing yourself to observe these changes, patterns of movement within that inner landscape of your body. And it is an observation because it may well change. I'm not talking about sort of developing a system where this is always the same. There's many things that can influence it. But once we've got that awareness, it's much easier to navigate a course through that landscape. It's like if you go to a place, maybe a woodland or something like that. If you know the layout of the woods, you know where the paths are, or you've got a map or something like that. It's a much smoother process to walk through the wood. Do this one more time. So we're trying to maintain this spaciousness within the body as we go through the various movements. So if you think about it, it's quite a challenging thing to do, because quite often we've developed habits of movement that are the opposite of that sort of smoothness, that kind of idea of flowing into the space, but are rather based on more of a sense of straining. This time, your hands drop down to your sides and dragon plucks the stars from the sky, expanding through one side, with the rotation in your arm, wrapping your fingers around gently and pull down. And then change to the other side. Usually with these aspects of kind of what we might call the internal movements, we notice them in some exercises and not others to begin with. Remember, it's the smaller movements that we're noticing, that we're gradually becoming familiar with, gradually integrating more into the movement through that familiarity, that build into the larger movements, the ones that you can see me doing. One more on each side. And then back to both hands together. Do the first and the last of these to begin with. Bring your hands up just a little bit above your head, palms facing up. Feel the weight of your arms flowing down through your shoulders and your sides. And then back down your sides. And then pushing out. And again, feel the weight of your arms, this time hanging from your shoulders. And you might want to just adjust where your arms are. In particular, and this, when we extend our arms, we often have a habit of pulling them back, but keep them just a little bit in front of your body so that you preserve that feeling of your back being longer and broader than the front of your body, supporting the front of your body. Back lengthening and contracting with this one. And then broadening and contracting, almost like somebody were massaging your back with these alternating strokes. So this time, without losing that feeling, turning in the middle of your body. And back. And in the other direction. And again, just trying to maintain a degree of focus internally, but not totally. You know, don't lose the sense of, if you like, the outer landscape. So for instance, when I started doing this exercise, I just shuffled forwards a little bit. If I hadn't have done, when I turn, one of my hands would constantly be hitting the wall. Not serious, but not required, shall we say. So in the same way that your body is expanding and contracting, you can think of your awareness expanding outwards and then drawing back in. One more of these on each side. And then let your hands drop down again, aware of the weight of your arms hanging from your shoulders. With the next expansion, one hand circling out, so it's just slightly above your head in line with your nose and down. And again, so each movement has its own sort of shape, its own plane of movement, and again, because of that, its own patterns associated within the body. And then if it's comfortable from this position here, the top position, turn a little bit. And then changing sides. Notice the difference between one side and another. It's very common to find that one side's got a bit looser or whatever. And this is one of those situations where it may just be maybe you slept on that side last night, or it could be kind of a temporary thing, shall we say. Or it could be a longer term thing. You've had some kind of injury to your shoulder, perhaps, or something like that. You've got the habit of movement through that. And then again, add in the turn. Just realised I forgot to mute you all. Now, letting your arms rest for a moment, sinking down and pushing up. Looking again at a more technical element of the posture. Our shoulders are said to stay in line with our hips. And certainly when we're not turning in this posture, this is what we want. So as you sink down, try and avoid this or this. The shoulders will move as far as your hips are moving. That's all they need to do. And this maintains the upright position, but this time tilting, and as you tilt forwards, within reason, if I could leave my arms here, you'll see they stay more or less on my hips, and then as I drop my hips back, my arms don't move. So that line, roughly speaking, remember there are no straight lines in your body, so don't strain for the line, just have this idea of the line. And then just releasing the arms, letting them follow in the movement, rowing a boat in the middle of the lake. Easy on your back and knees. One more time. And then polishing the table, same idea, but with the addition of a horizontal turn in the center of your body. Then your hips go back, then you turn around, and then the hips drop under. One more in each direction. Good, and then letting your hands drop down and turning in the center of your body again. But this time, once you've got the movement going, just let it slow down again, like the ball coming to rest slowly until you just find a sort of natural resting position for your body. Give your legs a little shake. Good. So this central position, the term that I really like for this is central equilibrium. Zhongding is the Chinese term, and you could argue that really what we try and do with Tai Chi in all its aspects, the healing aspect, the martial aspect, meditation, and so on and so forth, is to maintain this quality of Zhongding, of equilibrium, which is quite challenging, of course. There's some of the postures are difficult to do that with. Bringing the mind into the whole equation and trying to keep a calmness in the mind is perhaps the most difficult thing of all for most of us. But of course, remember also that from the point of view of the martial art, there's a kind of almost a pressure training, a stress training there in situations that are actually quite uncomfortable. Can we find this sense of equilibrium? And I think it's something very much that we learn to take with us into our daily lives. So changing your posture, I think in a way, this next posture, the forward posture, is one that shows us how we can begin to move from one point to another and retain some of this quality of equilibrium. Again, paying attention to your stance. Turn one foot out. This is an angle in your foot that you can play about with once you're used to the movement. Step forwards, keeping the width of your step and going about the same in length. And begin to just move your weight from one foot to another. So one very important thing to think about here is how we're moving and where the movement comes from. So it's always going to come from the ground in Tai Chi. Many of you've all seen me do this before. Let me just remind you of this. If I have this bottle in front of me, you can see it quite clearly today. I'm going to hold on to the wall. It'll be easier that way. If I want to move it and I push it at the top like this, it's going to go straight over. But hopefully, if I move it from the bottom, it's going to be much more stable, especially since it's full of water, and so it's quite heavy at the bottom. I'm not going to do this too much. It's getting caught up on the floor covering. But you can see already that is, there it goes straight over. Next time with the other way around, it's far more likely to remain stable. So we move from the ground, we use our feet to move the body. That may sound obvious, but actually a lot of our habits involve leading a little bit with the shoulders. So as you transfer the weight, give yourself a moment on each leg to settle, to really feel your weight dropping into the foot, softening in ankle, knee, hip, wherever else you feel it is appropriate. It's good to emphasize that to begin with, but actually it really only takes a moment once you're used to it. So even though it's quite likely that in between the legs, during the movement, we go slightly offline, or we lose the route, or we lose the focus of our attention, that quietness, that calmness, whatever. There is also equally a moment where we can find our way back to it. So think back to exercises like rooting down. How did it feel to sink? And this doesn't necessarily mean your knees are going to bend more, but it's those internal qualities moving through your body that we're really looking for here. And then just raising your toes. And then when you go forwards, push your heel up. So now more of your weight has a chance to flow down through your leg. And then when you feel there's enough weight in one leg to be able to move the other leg without straining, bring the foot in, step out. When you go forwards, your heel goes down first, then your toes. You'll notice that I've got this foot slightly turned out now. Back knee rises. And when you feel you've got enough weight in the leg, just bring the foot in. So gradually increasing the amount of weight that is flowing down through one leg, thinking about the alignment of your body. So if you've gone forward and you're like this, slightly angled forward, as soon as you lift that leg up, you're off. So the term I like to use, the word I prefer to use is stability. Don't think about balance. We only need to balance when we lose stability. So the stability comes from the dropping of your center of gravity and the alignment of your body with the pull of gravity. There are other factors that come into play in our daily lives. So change over, have you on the foot forwards. Other factors might be, well, one thing which is important, maybe the footwear that you're wearing, or maybe you're on bare feet or whatever. The surface that you're working on, and I'm assuming since you're working at home, this isn't some kind of rough piece of grass or something like that. It's quite interesting to do these exercises out there. If it's a bit windy, without taking foolish chances, of course. Just how does the wind, as it sort of like ebbs and flows, affect you? And then raising toes and heel. And stepping in. Remember those small movements, those small changes in your body, recognizing that those are the movements that are far more likely to be affected by subtle elements of mind, you know, your feelings, your understanding, any imagery that you use, the focus of your attention. And then just take a few steps through, forwards or backwards, depending on where the space is. And in the other direction. Bring your feet parallel. Another term strongly associated with these qualities is the Chinese term sum. This is the one that's normally translated as relaxed. Actually, I'm going to grab the water bottle again because it's quite handy. So this is a flexible bottle filled up with water, and if I push my finger in, it gives to it. There's a kind of springiness there. I'm not going to do it too much in case the bottle splits. And that's the sort of quality that we want to feel within our body. I sometimes use the term releasing. Again, some of you have done this with me before, but to illustrate this, and try this, roll your fingers into a fist just with one hand and grip tightly and feel feel what happens with the grip, the muscles hardening up, maybe a bit of aching or pain, maybe right up into the shoulder. If we simply think, well, that's not very nice, I'm going to relax, we lose the whole structure. So there's no fist there to work with. But if I do this, and if you watch here in between my fingers, I just open up my fist. I get a gap in there, almost like I'm wrapping my fingers around something very delicate, like a leaf or a feather or something like that. I can maintain the structure without the same sense of tightness and stiffness. And that's so when we talk about releasing in the hips, there may be a visible change in the structure. Your hips may drop down a little bit more, or maybe even come up if you've already gone down deep, but not necessarily, because I'm talking about these internal feelings that we stimulate through the mind-body connection. And this is again sort of something that is fundamental to Tai Chi. So now have your right foot forwards, mirror my movement. Place your hands on your belly, ease forwards, and as you settle into the front leg, and you get that feeling of releasing or softening, however you think about it, push your arms out. And again, your hands are in front of your body. Sink back, and as you release into the back foot, bring your hands in. So it's the sinking down that produces that little bit of buoyancy coming up, like pushing the ball into water, that will move your arms. And eventually, it's not that systematic. Your arms will begin to move as soon as your weight moves, because that's also a kind of forward energy. If you look here, what I'm going to do, I go to, this is when my weight has stopped moving forwards, but is sinking down. But there's still a connection there. One more time. And going to make the change to fisherman castanet. So you sink back, and as you settle in, you let your arms drop. You feel the weight of your arms on your shoulders. And then you go forwards. This time, drawing your arms through. And notice where my hands go to. I'm not going up here. They're going forwards. They're sweeping through with the energy of the weight change from one foot to another. Fisherman castanet. This is a nice, smooth, expansive movement. And so what we want to do now is to take all that movement, that energy, give it a slightly different shape. And that's all we're doing. We're going into the movement, pushing wave. You just let your hands come in front of your hips, your elbows go out a little bit, and then push forward. So you've now got a more compact, a more economic, and a stronger sense of movement. So you can see those moments when we settle are actually quite significant moments. They're the ones where we load the legs for the release of energy. Like if going back to throwing a ball or throwing a stone, you pick the ball up, you hold it in your hand. Think, well, I want to throw it over there. You have the intent to throw it there, but then you don't just go like that. You pull back and you prepare the body for the throw. One more time. Good. And shake out. Have your other foot forward, so your left foot forward, and again, pigeon spreads its wings, going forward, sinking, feeling your elbows being pushed out and drawing your fingers apart, and then reversing that as you go back. Expanding in the front of your body and expanding in your back. One more time. Changing now to fisherman castanet. And then pushing wave. Once more. Good, and shake. So adding to the up and down movement, you know, the pull of gravity, the response of the body, we build in a horizontal movement, which is directing that energy, those movements forwards and backwards. And the next element that we build, and we've already done a little bit of this, is to turn in the center to redirect the arms. So have your right foot forwards, starting your back foot, go forwards as though you're going to do fisherman cast a net, but then this time as you go back, turn towards your back foot, let the arms swing up and over, and then down. Turn a little bit more, and the same thing on the other side. Trying to have as much as you can, palms of your hands facing the direction of the movement. Go on the other side. So your left foot forwards, go forwards, and your arms swing through. But as you come back, just that one change is to let the arms move across your body, and then continue moving this time. There's an expansion here through your left side, not dissimilar to the expansion that we would have noted perhaps in Dragon Plucks the Stars from the Sky. Turn your front foot out, and this time as you go forwards and turn, again, let your back knee fold in, bring your heel up, step through, plant the foot down, and then move into it. Oops. And then if you haven't done so already, you can change direction. You could actually go in any direction with this exercise. I always do it on these films, forwards and backwards. It's the simplest way, but it's a very adaptable exercise. You could, for instance, you don't have to step backwards or forwards. You could step sideways. You could change direction. I'm going to do one more in this direction, and I'll show you what it means. Remember, it's the center of your body that's going to redirect your body and your intent. So here I think, well, I'm going to step this way now. And then maybe I'll step forwards again. So it's an exercise you can do in almost any space. That one. Good. Rubbing your hands together. Tapping over your face. Over your head and neck. Shoulder. And your arm. On the other side. Onto your back. And around your hips. And your legs. Light on your belly and the upper part of your chest. Shake out. And to finish, coming back to this basic stance, literally coming back to it, standing in position. And so for embrace tiger, return to mountain, sinking down. And as you push up, inevitably, and your arms go out, you get to a point where maybe you've stiffened up or you feel a bit unstable or maybe your attention has drifted away. but the exercise, the movement, the pull of gravity itself will bring you back. So there's this cycle that we can bring our attention to. It's this cycle of gravity pulling down, bringing us in your body, pushing you up. And at a certain point in that cycle, we will always sort of touch base, as it were. There will always be that moment of settling. So this becomes an exercise that I said when we were transferring the weight, inevitably we lose that sense of equilibrium. But then when we were on one leg, we were getting it back again. This is an exercise that can really help you to know what to look for, to just get that little moment or two of being physically rooted, but just as importantly, to look for that calmer, stiller quality in your awareness. So one more time. And stand, your hands just come to rest by your sides. Once again, feeling your structure, feeling your posture, supported through your skeleton, through your legs, through the ground beneath you. And just take a couple of slow, gentle breaths to finish. Shake out. Thank you very much, everybody.